we're on antibiotics. They cure us. Everything from skin bacteria to pneumonia. But what we're seeing is the fact that these antibiotics are growing resistance. And I won't say very little is being done about it, but I think very little is being done about supporting these. There are a number of companies, but the challenges we have is around discovering more and better antibiotics. And even when they're found, the biggest challenge is that they're reserved as last line therapies in the hospitals, in the clinic. One of the biggest issues is
The problem is sepsis, right?
sepsis is certainly one,
Yeah.
and any bacterial infection can evolve to sepsis.
Right.
And in fact, one of the areas that is the least amount of advancement is in the area of urinary tract infections. If you think about it, this is a very common infection. And the treatments that are out there are 40 years old. There hasn't been a new one developed or launched in the past 20 years. So anybody with a female significant other, or if you happen to be female, you can go to the next slide. 50% of the women will have a UTI at some time in their life. These are one of the most common bacterial infections. In fact, there's about 32 million prescriptions that are written for UTIs, uncomplicated UTIs. And, the CDC has come out and said that this is one of the greatest public health concerns of our lifetime. There's not enough being done for this. Go to the next slide. What utility has done is we've acquired the US rights to 2 products for the treatment of UTIs. Pivmecillinam, which is an oral product for uncomplicated UTIs, and mesillinam, which is an IV for complicated UTIs. What we've done is we've moved Pivia or pivmecillinam forward. We have developed an NDA. We've been working with the FDA now for about 4 years, looking at utilizing all of the existing information on this product. It's been available in Europe for 40 years. And in fact, it's listed on international guidelines as a first-line option. You can look across Europe, and they all have pivmecillinam listed as a first-line option. The challenge is that it's never been brought to the US. And the reason it hasn't been brought to the US is because the discoverer of this is Leo Pharma, who discovered this back in the 70s and 80s and essentially put it on the shelf because they're a dermatology company. And it lost essentially all of its IP. What's happened in the past couple of years, though, is that the FDA, in a way to encourage companies to invest and to discover more drugs, came up with the Qualified Infectious Disease Product designation. And what that does is it allows 2 things. One is it allows for an expedited review of 6 months, and it also provides an additional 5 years of data exclusivity. And I'll come back to that in a minute. If you go on. Oh, one more. There's a couple really unique aspects about this opportunity. One is that bringing pivmecillinam or Pivia to the US market represents an advancement in the treatment of uncomplicated UTI. It's a brand new mode of action. It works in a different way than other beta-lactams, if you will. It also has 40 years of experience, meaning it's proven clinically, both for efficacy and for safety. And I think more importantly, it's also proven to have a very low level of resistance to all of the bacteria that cause UTIs. It's listed on the Infectious Disease Society of America guidelines as a first-line option. We are ready for submission. We've been working on this for the past couple of years. We actually had to go back and dig down to the patient level data and bring it back up. And the exclusivity, which is about 10 years, so you'll get 5 years for an NCE or new chemical entity. We'll get an additional 5 years for the QIDP. That's what's now making it attractive on the US market and why our founders licensed this from Leo Pharma. Product is already made. There's no issues there. We're already contracted with the contract manufacturing organization that supplies the rest of the world. They've already been FDA inspected. And there's a huge societal impact in the fact that the products that are currently on the market continue to increase in levels of resistance. They're already surpassing 20 to 40% regionally. In fact, if you look at pivmecillinam compared to those other products in Europe, you will see the rate of resistance in Europe continuing to grow and the rate for pivmecillinam remaining low and stable at 5% or below. The business case for this is extremely strong. It's 100% share of voice at launch, and it's in the community setting, which means all we need to do is get physicians to prescribe this. That's what sales forces do. The biggest challenge may be getting managed care to pay for it, but we have a way around that as well. And we've also got support from them in the fact of how we're looking to price this product on the market. Add to that, you also have growth opportunities in terms of life cycle management, other indications, and so on, as well as the mesillinam product. As I said, it's a unique product. It's got 20 years of low and stable resistance, 40 years of data, no severe adverse events. When the FDA is going to look at this, they're going to look at, is this product safe and is it effective? Well, yes, it's extremely safe. The only side effects above 1% are nausea and diarrhea, something you would expect from any antibiotic. And there have been no severe adverse events for this product either. What we're planning to do with our NDA is pretty much unheard of for a lot of products that are submitting an NDA or a new drug application. We've got 12 studies supporting the safety and efficacy. All 12 will be used for safety. 6 of these studies will be used for efficacy. Of the 6, 3 are primary studies. And the bare minimum for the FDA is to have a placebo-controlled study. 2 of these studies are essentially placebo-controlled, and 1 is a comparative study. All of this supports the fact that this is an efficacious product. The other efficacy studies are of higher doses, again, supporting this idea that it's a safe and efficacious dose. Go ahead. Nope, back one. The resistance level, I don't know if you can see at the bottom.
Why did you said Leo, right?
Leo.
Yeah, why did they license it out as Leo?
They have no interest in it. It's been sitting on their shelf. They're a dermatology company.
Yeah.
Our founders happen to be Danish, and Leo's in Denmark. I think there's a little Danish mafia there, but regardless to say, they got an incredible deal. Leo is one of the investors in the company, but we own the data outright for the US. If you look at this, normally you see the rates of resistance.
So you only have US rights?
Just US.
Oh, you don't have international?
No, international is essentially gone generic at this point because it's been on the market for so long. But it's still widely used and considered the first line therapy. In fact, in Denmark, where it is the first line therapy, you can see over these years, it's increased fourfold, but the resistance to this has remained low and stable, which is what the FDA is also going to be looking for.
So what is it that the FDA will require you if this drug is 40 years old and it is sell over the counter in Europe? So what is it that the FDA will require?
FDA, we've already spoken to the FDA in utilizing the existing studies that are out there. And what we had to do, because the FDA came out in 2019 with guidelines on how to conduct a study. And that's why it's taken us a couple of years. We had to break that data down to the patient level and bring it back up according to those guidelines. We've already met with the FDA. They understand what we're putting in front of them. And they're just waiting for us to submit it to them.
You're not required to do these studies here.
No.
So what prevents somebody, who's faced with your product saying, okay, I'm going to buy it out of Mexico, buy it out of Canada, at generic
No different than any other product you have on the market. But why they would do it for this, I think the other issue would be the fact that the API is hard to manufacture. And we have one of the providers of API, Fresenius KB, who is going to manufacture this.
What have you done about negotiating so early, I suppose, with reimbursement?
So reimbursement's a great question. The biggest challenge that I think a lot of the antibiotic companies have faced with launching is they've had to recoup all of their phase 3 costs, and they've priced it very high. Add to the fact that their products, because there isn't any historical utilization, have been reserved as a last line therapy. So when you have to recoup costs and you're getting, a fraction of the patients utilizing it, they've had to price very high. Our plan, because managed care is looking to constrain costs as much as possible, it costs managed care somewhere in the neighborhood of about $300 to put a prior author step edit in place, which is what would restrict it at the pharmacy. Our plan is to price this at about $150.
A treatment?
A treatment. And still be able to generate about 500 million at peak.
We have about 5 minutes.
Yep, but that's not the best part.
I believe some women develop what they call chronic
Yes.
UTI.
Mhm.
Does this have an application for
It
that?
absolutely does. I mean, we're listed on the guidelines. This basically shows that we're listed on the guidelines as a first line treatment. We have the data and all of the representing the 10.5 years. Physicians support this. Managed care supports this. They see the need because the treatments are faltering. What I want to bring your attention to here is,
Is there any application for STDs?
no.
It's
It
also
works
used-
very much in the bladder. And that's one of the things that is very unique about this. When you look at the top 3 products there represent over 90% of the prescriptions for uncomplicated UTIs. Quinolones are black box first line. TMP SMX, which is Bactrim, is really against guidelines to be used first line because the resistance is so high. And nitroflantoin, which is probably the number 1, which represents about 35% of the overall business, does not work on some of the other bacteria like Klebsiella.
So have you done an analysis on the mixed bacteria? Most UTIs are mixed bacteria.
And
So-
that's where we-
biofilm formation. and all that sort of-
And that's where we work because we work across the majority of the pathogens.
The majority. What
Yes.
about the minority?
Those are really, really small, but it does work across the majority of those.
Is it, so I noticed that you have, you have negative organism coverage.
Gram negative,
Gram negative.
Yeah.
But what about gram positive?
No.
It doesn't work on
No.
gram positive?
no,
That's
beta
why you're
lactam.
limiting it to UTIs.
exactly. So we have a very good competitive set against the products that are out there. The products that are coming, there's 2 products in development. One is from Iterum. They're in a phase 3, as well as one from GSK. Neither of those will ever make it to first line therapy in the time that this product, Pivia, is on the market. they will always be reserved as a second or third line therapy because they don't have the historical perspective of what their resistance level is.
So in the eventuation of introducing it here, what do you think that there will be a requirement for bacteriology ahead of its prescription?
No,
Or it'll be just given on reflex?
it's going to be given on reflex because that's how it's done across Europe, and that's how it's done in the guidelines.
That's very interesting.
Yes.
That is interesting.
Well, what's happening, and COVID has caused this, is women will call their urologist and say, I've got another UTI. And the doctor will call it in, and the patient needs it. I know, 2 minutes. This is our pathway, which is within about 8 months, we'll have an answer from the FDA. The outcomes are either it's approved with a post-marketing, or require a phase 3. I'm very bullish on the two on the left because of the amount of data we have. Again, this is
How old is that data?
the data is 10 to 15 years old, and some of it's older. But we've brought it all back up according to their guidelines, and it really hasn't changed. What we're looking to raise is about 5 million. That covers getting the manufacturing up and running, organizational expense.
Why can't you import it from there?
You still have to get it approved here.
But what manufacturing would you have to do?
Oh, you have to buy the API, you have to tablet it. It has to be
That's
without
all
the Leo
pharmaceutics.
emblem.
It's all
Yes,
pharmaceutics.
yes, absolutely.
Right.
And then addressing the FDA
What
questions,
does 5 million buy?
that it buys you,
No. What percent?
oh, sorry, about 10%,
You're valuing yourself at
about
40,
55
55 after the money.
before the money. So,
Okay. But not bad for assembling some data from overseas.
no, not at all. But here's the what's that?
Out of those three choices, I put money on the second one.
So
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be the middle.
just real quickly,
Well,
I don't, that's
you
my,
need
all.
my opinion.
the $5 million gets you through the 8 months.
Yes, but the kicker here is that our exit is to sell to big pharma. And there will be no shortage of companies lining up to acquire this. And if you look at some of the most recent acquisitions within antibiotic space, they've been for a forecast that peaked at 50% of what we plan to be a couple hundred million. And so we already have a lot of interest from one very large manufacturer or one large pharma company. But there are numerous others that are lining up, and it will be a bidding war for this asset. And it's 12 months away.
Where's the company physically?
Well, we're domiciled in the UK. I live in New Jersey, and we're more or less virtual. So I'll say New Jersey.
Why are you domiciled in the UK?
Long story. If you're going to dinner, I'll explain it to you.
All right.
Previous CEO lived there, and they wanted it there. But
So how much the cost of the manufacturing, where are you going to manufacture, and how long it will take for you to see what will be the reimbursement?
oh, the reimbursement will happen, and selling to a large pharma company, this will fold into everything that they're doing, and they will have the coverage and the distribution. Again, the idea
You don't
here is to
know
exit.
right now what.
How much has to be raised after this 5 million?
Or is this the
After?
last raise?
Yes.
This is it, because we want to exit come the FDA decision. And
Well, what if the FDA says, okay, we want a phase 3 study here?
Can we go back? Yeah, can we go back to this?
Absolutely.
That's one of the thoughts.
that is one of the thoughts. And we do have somebody that has already done a very similar deal, that they've received a request for a phase 3 from the FDA and still did the deal because it fits their portfolio. They know what the term sheet needs to look like. They know what the timeline is. And so it's still on the table and still an exit.
But not the same actually.
Wouldn't be the same exit. The deal I just said was a couple $100 million, was the one that still involved them having to do a phase 3.
And if it's clear sailing from the finish, what do you think we'd get?
Total deal value, I believe, is probably about 450. That's with royalties and milestones. Probably
It's a
about
10 bagger on
75
the
to 80 up front.
Okay.
So,
Interesting.
listen, it's de-risked in the sense that there's a huge need. There is a commercial opportunity. There are companies waiting for this outcome. And all we really need to do is be able to bridge from where we are today to be able to file this and get the manufacturing up and running.
Where are you on the raise?
We've raised already about $1 million.
Okay.
Just a question, given that you're a doctor, right? So you know more than I do, but, if you don't have the FDA headwind, wouldn't you want to go to someone that's a all-in-one, meaning just distribution, like big pharma?
Yes.
That could just put it into their pipeline and offer production, distribution, and everything.
So the big pharma that I'm talking about, that's exactly what we would do. They would still have to manufacture at a contract manufacturing because that's the site that they can. They would have to do a tech transfer and it would take years. But going with big pharma who is interested gets me the marketing, gets me the sales force, gets me managed care, gets me distribution, gets me everything. And that 450 would likely turn to be closer to about 657 because their managed care deals will be able to get a higher net price and they'll be able to drive the uptake faster.
Is there a headwind from the traditional manufacturers of the penicillin?
No.
What about Novo Nordisk, which is,
Diabetes, but yes.
well, it's Danish based.
Yes.
The guy that actually does the acquisitions is someone on the chairman of a company that we involved with called Lita Care Rethox, which is a immunity Danish salt.
Yeah.
So that guy, he's the chairman of that company, but he's also in charge of acquisitions of Novo Nordisk. Why wouldn't they?
I don't think this would be of interest to Novo.
They don't just do diabetes; they do other things as well.
Yeah.
Well, you know, there is a link that UTIs are more common in diabetic patients.
Yes, and the therapies themselves may cause it too.
Listen, look, your worst, first of all, I think the benefit that you have is you have a very high safety profile
Yes.
out of the others. I think what will happen is, on the downside is, if they require you to do a phase 3, then you'll get basically a readout deal after a phase 2, right? Which then pharma will come in, give you some upfront payment.
Well,
and then
what
milestones
would
out.
happen is
As
if it
opposed
is,
to
then
an
we'd have
outright
a
sale.
SPA in
Yeah.
place with the FDA of what we would need to do.
Right.
Could
But
you,
guys, we have to stop this conversation because actually there's gonna be
your offering?
3 Ubers downstairs waiting to pick us up and take us to
Could
the
you
restaurant.
modulate your offering to say, you'll get this value if we get through, and if you'll get another value if we don't get through the FDA?
Floor and a ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there is always risk, yes.